Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the African Football Roundup. To be completely honest, I was kind of waiting on this episode to kind of make it a reaction to the 2023 CAF Awards in case there was any controversy, any drama. And as controversial as the short lists of these finalists were, the final top three, I don't think any of the actual winners were controversial decisions. So congratulations to Victor Osimhen, African Player of the Year. He's who I voted for. Asiso Oshuala is less of a unanimous decision, but I think people can understand that decision as well. And I think most of them were quite logical choices. So instead, what we're going to do today is we are going to do an Afcon preview since we are just 30 days away from the 2023 African Cup of Nations, which actually is going to be played in 2024. So what we're going to do is an early preview of this Cup of Nations. I had done a video like this earlier on in the calendar year. And at the time, we didn't even know who had qualified. And I called that video a too early prediction for the Cup of Nations. This one is just an early prediction of the Cup of Nations. We're only 30 days away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 24 teams, all 24 teams, and I'm going to place them into categories of favorites, contenders, dark horses, and then the last category is here for a good time. And I'm going to try to justify those choices. I'm not going to go into too much detail for each of these countries. They're just going to be general thoughts. Because what we're going to be doing over the next month or so as well is we're going to be speaking to journalists or experts from each of these countries, every single one of them, and they're going to be previewing and breaking down their respective teams in detailed analysis. So without any further ado, let's get down to it and let's look at this very early 2023 African Cup of Nations prediction. So the first thing when we look at any African Cup of Nations, I think we automatically have to make the defending champions and the hosts, we have to sort of place them as favorites. That's usually the case for 90% of the tournaments. So automatically, Senegal as defending champions, Cote d'Ivoire as hosts automatically go there. Now, who else are actual favorites? And by favorites, what I mean is these are sides that you would expect to see at least in the semifinals. And you wouldn't at all be shocked to see them actually win this tournament. I think most people would put Morocco here, and I'm more inclined to disagree. I think Morocco has shown some interesting vulnerability since the World Cup. What was interesting about their World Cup run was that every single one of their matches that they had less ball possession in, they actually won or drew. And every single match that they had more ball possession in, including the semifinal against France, they actually lost. And that was a trend that carried on after the World Cup as well. And Morocco is a team that we're going to expect, I think, to see hold on to the ball, at least have more ball possession, than a lot of their opponents, especially in the group stages. And so that's one of the things I think we're going to see them maybe struggle with, not to mention that they don't really have a very reliable striker, in my opinion. I think that could be a problem. So I think they might struggle to score goals. They might be a little bit vulnerable. But if they get into the knockout stages, I think Morocco will be dangerous. So we have Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, Morocco. And the final team that I have as a favorite, and this might come as a surprise to some, is actually Egypt, the most successful side ever at the African Cup of Nations. Now, why Egypt? Egypt, I think when Jose Mourinho talked about football heritage, I think that was one of the most incredible speeches in football history. And I think it very much applies in tournaments. Egypt are, of course, the all-time winners. But look at their results over the last three tournaments. They've made it to the final of the last three tournaments. Of two of the last three tournaments, 2017, 2021. And they're pretty much returning the same side. Mohamed Shinawi is still the goalkeeper. You still have players like Mohamed Abdelmun'im, who was there last time around. You still have players like, I'm blanking on names now, but Tariq Hamid just retired, so that's not a good example. But, obviously the front line, Trezeguet, Salah, Kahraba, all of these players are players that have been there for really since 2017. Some have been there even prior to that. And I think that experience will play a role. And the fact So experience is one of their strengths. Football heritage is another. And finally, besides Nigeria, or maybe even better than Nigeria, Egyptian strikers or their forwards or attackers have been the most in form in Europe. So Mohamed Salah has had a great start to the season. Mustafa Mohamed at Nantes, their striker. Trezeguet or Omar Marmoush at Eintracht Frankfurt, also been very, very good. So I think they're clicking in just the right amount of time. The coach, I think, has a lot of trust in Egypt. They know how they want to play. They know their identity. They're going to play defensive. They're going to have very destructive midfield. They're going to recycle possession, and then they're going to get the ball to a talented attacking line, and they're just going to score enough goals to win the match. So I think Egypt is going to be my fourth and final team that I have as a favorite. So let's go on to the contenders. Excuse me. So for the contenders, I have Algeria, my country, as one of the contenders. And by contenders here, I mean this is a team that you can expect to see in the quarterfinals. You wouldn't be at all surprised to see them win it. So we have Algeria, we have Nigeria. Algeria have a new team. Sorry, I didn't speak about them. They have a new squad, a lot of new talent. Players like Ryan Aït-Nouri from Wolves, players like Houssam Aouar from Roma, players like Amin Gouiri from Rennes. These are all very highly talented, prodigies. And they've been blooded into the side by Jamal Belmadi, who was criticized for really holding on to too many of his older players from the 2019 Afcon winning side and not really blooding in new players. But as they were eliminated from the World Cup, Jamal Belmadi decided to make those changes. And I'm not sure we're there yet with Algeria. We're still seeing problems in central defense. We're still seeing problems in defensive midfield. And it's just not looking great on the pitch. They're lacking a little bit of team chemistry. So Algeria have the talent, I think, but it still hasn't clicked yet. When I see it click, then I could think about them as favorites. Nigeria, boy, I mean, how many times have we talked about them? It's been the same narrative for the last 2-3 years. On the pitch, very talented, one of the most talented sides in Africa. We know that, especially the strikers or the front line, probably one of the deepest in the world. Victor Osimhen just won African Player of the Year. We know it's going to be his first Afcon, so I'm actually very excited to see what he can do there. But we know Nigeria have a lack of depth in midfield. We know that their goalkeepers have been making critical errors in the last few years. And the coach, Jose Peseiro, I think is someone that doesn't have the... Unlike Egypt's Rui Vitória, who has the confidence of the nation, I don't think Jose Peseiro at all has the confidence of the nation. So we still have them as contenders, surely because... We still have them as contenders just because of the amount of talent they have. Our next set of contenders are going to be Cameroon. Cameroon, I think, on paper, are more talented than Nigeria, probably just as talented or maybe even more talented than Algeria. For me, they're one of the most talented sides on the continent, and they have a lot of good experience as well. I love their squad. I think their starting 11 is tailor-made for the Afcon, and they can win it. But their weakness is a major weakness, and that's the coach Rigobert Song. I do not trust him. And I think anybody that knows football doesn't really trust Rigobert Song, including many people in Cameroon. He just doesn't simply seem to be a good coach. He's probably put in the position of a coach because Samuel Eto'o is his friend, and he kind of lucked out with that last-second victory in Algeria, and which got him to the World Cup. But since then, I mean, look at his record. Simply not good enough. And especially for his starting 11. So that's why I have them as contenders, because their squad is good enough like Nigeria's, but I have major, major questions about the coaching. Speaking of talented squads and major questions about the coaching, let's throw Ghana up there. The last window of FIFA World Cup qualifying have been very disappointing for Ghana and Nigeria, as they dropped matches or lost to teams like Lesotho or Comoros, and teams that they should be beating as, historic heavyweights on the continent. So Ghana, we all know, have a great side, probably not as talented as those sides of 2008, 2010, up until 2015. But still, they still have a lot of good young talent. And obviously, the cream of the crop is Mohamed Kudus. Chris Hughton, though. I mean, I'm not saying he's a bad coach. He's obviously proven he has a lot of experience, but it's similar to what's happening with Pesero in Nigeria, where I just feel that the public don't have confidence in him. And as a result, I mean, they're dropping points. They're playing very defensive. They seem to be lacking confidence and momentum. And so they can always turn it around because Ghana are Ghana. But I have them in the contenders, and I think that's could even be being a bit generous with them. They could have dropped them down into dark horses. And finally, we have two more sides in the contenders. We have Mali, and we have Tunisia. So Mali, Mali actually, unlike Nigeria, unlike Cameroon, who we say, or Ghana, who we've been talking about having troubles very recently, Mali are very, very hot. Since they named their coach Eric Schell, I believe he's coached in 13 matches. He's won 9, he's drawn 2, and he's only lost 1. Or is that 12 matches? I believe that's 12 matches. But that is his record, I'm sure of it. And so he's like really in the new mold of African coaches like Jamal Belmadi, like Aliou Cissé, like Walid Regragui in Morocco. He's, a young coach that has his license, his CAF, his pro license. He has his coaching badges. He's a former Mali international. The players like him, they trust him, and they've been getting great results. And not just against poor opposition. They beat the likes of Saudi Arabia in friendlies. So they look really good. But Mali are perennial contenders or dark horses, and they never really get over the hump. But I wouldn't be surprised to see them in the quarters or the semis this time around as well. And finally, Tunisia, they blow hot and cold. We never really know what to expect from them. 6 months ago, I was really confident in the team. They had a nice friendly against Algeria. They looked like they looked coherent. They knew what they were doing. They were just lacking a number 9, kind of like Morocco. This summer, they went over to Far East Asia. They played in a tournament called the Kirin Cup, a tournament that they actually won last year. And this year, I have to believe they lost 3-0 to South Korea, 4-0 to Japan, or maybe I got those results mixed up. But it was just like, who is this team? It's really Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I was in Tunisia, a couple weeks back, and I was trying to poll, like my friends and just the general public. Anytime I had a chance to speak to Tunisians, hey, what do you think about the coach Jalal Qadri? What do you think about the team? And the general consensus was that the coach is limited, very limited, and that Tunisia simply don't have, like the budget to pay like a really good experienced coach like maybe Egypt does or Morocco or even Algeria. And so there's that problem. And the other problem was that sometimes we feel like some of their best players were playing in the same position. And for me, like one of the journalists that told me this, I think he was spot on. He was talking about Issa Al-Eidouni and Elias Khiri, who he thinks are both really good number 6s. But sometimes you only need to play with one number 6. And so in midfield. And so still, I think Tunisia, if it can click. And if it can click, nobody knows the art of winning, the art of getting results like Tunisia. So it wouldn't at all surprise me to see in the semifinals, as they've made it in several tournaments in the very recent future as well. So let's move on to the dark horses. Dark horses for me are sides that are going to play good football, probably going to get out of the group stages, and are going to be building something for the future. Here I have South Africa, and I was really talking good about South Africa in during the international break, saying Bafana are back, and then they go and they lose to Rwanda in tough conditions, albeit, but still. So I have Bafana as a dark horse, who I think with that skeleton of Sundowns, plus the sprinklings of Percy Tau and a few other quality pieces, I think we'll do enough to get out of the group stages and maybe make it to a quarterfinal. But I still think are lacking a little bit of quality in the right areas to really make it far and win this tournament. Other team I'm going to have here is DR Congo, who like Mali are very, very hot. They were in trouble with Afcon qualifying. actually, and they looked like they weren't going to qualify. And since they hired Sebastian de Sabre, their coach, they've been winning nonstop. And Congo, actually, DR Congo, like Nigeria, they have really a whole host of strikers that I think that people kind of underrate. Players like Jackson Muleka, Cedric Bakambu. I'm not saying these are spectacular players, but they're serviceable. And so with the Sabra and these players, it seems like there seems to be some unity, some cohesion, and I think they can get out of the group stages. We also have Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso, I was more confident in them 6 months ago as well. But they the problem with Burkina Faso is it's hard to judge some of these teams during international breaks because they're not playing matches at home. And sometimes that can, paper over some of the cracks that other teams such as Ghana or Nigeria will have. Burkina Faso is not playing at home. And as a result, maybe sometimes they draw a match that they should win, But I do like a lot of the players on this team. I like Issa Kabore, who had a recent injury. I don't know if he's going to be playing at the Cup of Nations. I like Dango Ouattara. The striker Lassina Traore has injury problems, but it would be great to see him. So many good players. Of course, Tapsoba in defense. They have another really good young defender who I'm blanking on his name. And even in midfield, a lot of underrated players who are very serviceable, very industrial, and who I think people won't recognize, but who will give your team superstar players a lot of trouble. Gustavo Sangari is an example. Ibrahim Blati-Touré is another. So Burkina is a team that you can underestimate at your own at your own peril. Guinea, I think if they play a 3-5-2 and they line up with their best players and their players are healthy, can give anybody trouble. Look at the midfield of Amadou Diawara, Naby Keita, Iliax Moriba. It's a pretty great midfield, isn't it? Mohamed Bayo was one of the better strikers, in the top two divisions in France over the last 2-3 years. He can play as a striker. I'm not saying he's like a star player in France, but he's been respectable. Serhou Guirassy, one of the hottest names in world football. He's been setting records in the Bundesliga. If he can be healthy and he can play for Guinea, I mean, you have those two strikers, those three midfielders. It's not bad, right? So Guinea, I mean, they have the players. They like Eric Shelley from Mali. They brought in Kaba Diawara, a former player, young guy. Can he push them? I don't know. I mean, we talked about here. I'm vaunting all the qualities of Guinea, but then I watched him in the most recent international window, and I was very, very disappointed. So I didn't actually like what Kaba Diawara did. So again, on paper is one thing, and in reality is another. So that's why I have them here as dark horses. And the last two teams I'm going to have as dark horses are two of the hottest teams in Africa at the moment, Equatorial Guinea and Zambia. Zambia, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they finished ahead of the Ivory Coast in Afcon qualifying. Their front three are very, very good. Patson Daka is always great with the copper bullets. On the left, you have Fashion Sakala. On the right, you have Lamek Banda. Just so fun. They score a lot of goals, but they concede a lot of goals, and that's why I don't have them as contenders. And Equatorial Guinea are also one of the hottest teams in Africa. They showed at the last AFCON that they play with a lot of cohesion, even though they don't have the best players. And they play for their coach, and their coach Juan Micho has gotten really good results over the last 24 months, and I think he's going to bring a really cohesive side there. And finally, in the category here for a good time, we have the rest of these wonderful, respectable nations. And here, I don't mean this derogatorily. Here for a good time, I really do mean they're here to really build, progress, make their country proud, perhaps make a run. That it's not impossible. We've seen Madagascar do that. We've seen Comoros do that in recent tournaments. But I do think they're just lacking in too many areas to consider them dark horses or contenders. So we'll start with Angola. Angola maybe could have been dark horses. I think they have the quality to be dark horses, but it's just been a while since they've been at an AFCON, and I don't trust them. I don't trust the players that they have that are older, that have experience, but they don't have experience playing on the African continent, and then they have a lot of talented youngsters that don't have experience playing at this level. So experience is a problem for Angola. Tanzania have been, quietly building in the past. Under coach Adel Amrouche, they got some really impressive results. They haven't lost against, like teams that they've come up against, like, Morocco and Algeria. They've lost, but not by much. So they're playing good football. The criticisms of Amrouche at the beginning were that he maybe didn't know the side. He was like including random players. He was leaving out a lot of influential players. But Tanzania, they have, a lot of veterans. And I think those veterans are going to help them maybe make a respectable run. Namibia are going to be interesting. Namibia and Mozambique have, a lot of players playing in the PSL. Players that I think, players like Peter Shalalile, that, I think have proven that are quality, on the continent. We know them. And they've been getting good results, but their qualifying wasn't the most difficult, and they haven't really proven much yet. It's been such a while since we've seen them, at this level consistently, that I don't think they can make it far. Finally, Mauritania with Amir Abdou as a coach. Amir Abdou is a really good coach, former coach of Comoros. He's done a great job with Mauritania, lacking too much quality. Guinea-Bissau have been quietly also very much like Tanzania, like Mauritania. They've been building something over the last, 3 or 4 tournaments. They've been consistently qualifying, just lacking the quality. And Cape Verde and Gambia, I think, actually have better players, for example, than a Guinea-Bissau. Here, I know, like, people love coaches like Tom St. Feet, and he's a gentleman and he's accessible. I just think he can be outclassed when he comes against the likes of, Walid Regragui or Rui Vitoria or even Aliou Cisse or Jamal Belmadi. So that's my early 2023 African Cup of Nations prediction. Sorry if it took a little bit longer than usual. And I hope that we are going to have a great tournament. I can't believe we're only 30 days away, but I'm counting the seconds with bated breath. So keep it locked because, like I said, over the next month, we're going to be interviewing journalists or experts from each one of those countries that have qualified to the African Cup of Nations, and we're going to be previewing each team in depth. So I hope you're looking forward to that. And let me know if you agree with some of these categories. Who would be in your favorites? Who would be your contenders? Who would be your dark horses? And who's here for a good time in Abidjan? Who's just here to eat some aloko? All right. Thanks for listening. Keep it locked, and we'll speak to you soon on Friday for another episode of the African Five-A-Side podcast. Thank you. Take care and peace.